put time on there.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara. It is Monday, July 14th, 2025. And hey, it's Live Aid's 40th anniversary yesterday. So, hearing
Yeah,
that,
it's a very yeah. Go ahead.
I kind of dug out Queen's session on Live Aid and off of YouTube. And yes, it was as unbelievably good as I remember it, because actually Queen kind of enlivened that show, caused everybody to come out of their shell, and actually, you know, brought brought that whole place, brought the whole roof down, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a very extraordinary group. It's like Freddie Mercury and the band, and um, the the band was an excellent band, but it wasn't likely to uh, break the in really. And then there was Freddie Mercury, who himself probably could not break in as a solitary person. Once he became the lead singer of Queen, then the combination of a frontman, an extraordinary frontman with an extraordinary voice, I might add,
Yeah.
plus the musicality of the band behind him was just a winner in a
And the
big
fact
way.
that the one thing that was superb about Queen is that every album has got songs and music written by every member of the band.
Yes,
There's nobody
that's
got left out.
yeah. It was great, and that was because they each one of them had the power to contribute in a big way.
Yeah.
And if you analyzed each different musician, you would find that they're a very good musician, but each one of them would say, "Well, there's better than me out there."
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Beatles in a way. They were great musicians, but there were better virtuosos out there. But they played it in a certain way and with a certain style that was
But
infectious, and so
I,
was Queen.
I don't know that there was a better singer than Freddie Mercury, though, because
That's
the stuff he did, like for example, singing with Montserrat Caballé, in you know in that kind of style. Yeah, that was unbelievable.
Yeah,
That
he had
wasn't
an
Live Aid,
extraordinary
but
range. He had power and he had range, and he also had the common touch.
yeah,
He
oh
was
yeah,
a very he he was the personality of the band. That he was representative of the band. He was the vocal interpreter of what was happening. And let's talk about Live Aid. It turns 40, but what it was about the famine, and what we should talk about here is
Ethiopia, yeah,
Geldof. Geldof was a musician, and he united with another person. I forget that guy's name,
mid-Jura,
Majur.
yeah,
And what they
mid-Jura,
did now, this has they had a remarkable success. They got every notable musician probably at the time to come out and sing that song, the songs they sang, to create quite a bit of money that was going to be applied to the famine in Ethiopia. So Bob Geldof says, "Well, we can do something about this." Later on, this became controversial, and you post the article. So why was it controversial?
well,
I read it.
yeah, it was the controversial stuff was because they're basically saying it doesn't really represent Africa at all. There was no African artists on either show, either in Philadelphia or in Wembley, and it was primarily white men.
Yeah, it was mostly white musicians and white men. So of course somebody says, well, this is a concert for an African country, and yet there's no Africans on it. And and Bob Geldof, when confronted with that, said that wasn't really a consideration for him because all what he wanted really to do was get the biggest the highest performing artists on stage to make money. Uh, in his, and I would say in his defense, that at the time, if you had a host of African artists on there, nobody would know who they
Probably
were.
nobody would know who they were. Yeah, exactly. It's not like you see. It's 10 years later. Probably African artists would have broken through into mainstream, and you'd have been able to name a few, and
Yes.
everybody would have known who they were. But in 1985, no, probably not.
No, his idea was to make as much money with the biggest lineup as possible. And in his defense, at that particular time, the artists that he had on stage were the most popular, they were the most well known, and they all had that same objective. Like in,
Actually, I have to differ. By the way, not one artist came from Africa. Sorry, I am sorry to burst a bubble. The
oh,
great,
Freddie Mercury.
the greatest showman at that show came from Zanzibar, Africa. Freddie,
That's right.
right?
As a note, Freddie Mercury was a person of Indian descent that whose family moved to Zanzibar, and he was a Zoroastrian from Iran. His He was a Zoroastrian, which is the old Iranian
Yeah,
religion before Islam overwhelmed it. So he was an Indian from he was an Indian man who or no an Iranian man that of Iranian descent. So he was an Iranian that still was a Zoroastrian. It's part of the reason why his family went to Zanzibar because Zoroastrians were persecuted in Iran.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the whole point is that, yeah. So don't forget that Freddie Mercury is African by
Yes,
birth. By
yeah.
birth.
So that but he wasn't a black African, and even though he was a Iranian, so that would put him technically as a Caucasian. But and the other controversy was, do they know it's Christmas, which was the theme song, which offended a lot of people in Africa because they're like saying, "Do you think we're stupid?" Even though we don't have enough money for gifts or whatever to have Christmas. We have obviously know it is Christmas, particularly Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is a Christian nation, largely a
Like,
Christian
like,
nation.
there's 40 years have gone by already. Yes, unfortunately. Yeah, that's. I recorded every moment of that show. But I don't have the tapes anymore.
Yes, I was. I remember somewhere around there wondering if that money would ever get to where it was supposed to
Oh, it got
go.
there. It got there because, and that even Geldof made a big thing about, because not only did he make sure the stuff got on the ships, he made sure the stuff got off the ships and got taken to to the right places.
Yeah, so a big hats off to Bob Geldof, and a big hats off to all of those artists that went there. And of course, as you said, Queens was probably the showcase act of the night, and it was, I think, 2 million of the 7 million people who were alive. 2 billion of the 7 billion people who were alive at that time saw that. So it was a worldwide thing. Even though we have these sort of heavy complaints about this, it it's been interpreted as just another, oh, we white people will save you, we're wonderful. I hardly think that at all. I don't know how people can think that way. Uh, yeah, more consideration could have been put by putting African artists in there. Even in the 70s, there was a strong musical component to Ethiopian culture, but that kind of got squashed by the sort of oppressive communist government that took over there for a while. Um, I have a bunch of recordings called CDs called uh, Ethiopic, and they're recorded by gathered up by a French guy who looked for and found the music that was going on before the
Yeah,
communist government coming in. So uh, some of those artists cannot even are not even known on the recordings. But anyway, that's an aside. But yeah, you're right. Freddie Mercury was an African. He was from Zanzibar. Interesting. He was Iranian descent, and his religion was Zoroastrianism.
yeah,
Probably the very first monotheistic religion. Zoroastrianism. Um, Zoroastrianism had a lot to do with influencing Christianity, Islam, and many people think even Judaism.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, exactly. So,
Now, the whole idea that it was a colonial effort to save the people. We white people are so wonderful that we're going to, um, we're gonna do this wonderful thing for you. We're gonna save for you, But Ethiopia was drought stricken. They
yeah,
had a terrible time at the time,
yeah.
and Bob Geldof, working in the culture that he was, he knew the popular artists of the day because his own band had had some success. The Boomtown Rats had some success, so he knew the artists. He knew who they were.
Oh, yeah.
So, so when anybody complains to him, say, "Well, where were the African artists and stuff like that?" Well, he was putting out there hit a show with people that he knew, hoping to make money for the famine. And big hats off to them. Bob, okay, featuring luminaries. Oh, yeah, there was also one of the black artists, of course, was Tina Turner. So another
Yeah.
complaint is there wasn't enough female artists and there wasn't enough black artists. Well, Tina Turner was there, and but they still um, they still have this like misplaced idea that these people got together. I can hardly think of all these artists when they're asked to do this performance, even thinking, "Oh, we are the white race and we can save you, Africa." Do you ever think
No,
any
I
of
don't
that
think
kind of
they were thinking.
ideology?
I don't think they were thinking that. I think they were thinking they could do the best they can, which is only a small amount. They can do the best they can for people that are facing dire situation in Ethiopia right at that point, right?
Yes, I will agree with them that "Do They Know It's Christmas" was a dumb song. It really was dumb and
It
sort
was
of.
the wrong word. It was the wrong word, yeah, for that
It was
particular
the
phrase.
wrong words, and it was. I never liked it. I never liked it from the very first time I saw or heard it. It was like too kind of gushy, you know.
Yeah, but
Oh, do they
again,
know it's good?
remember, it was that those original words were conceived again primarily for an audience that wouldn't that that had to imagine that Africa was different.
This is a good quote by Midge Ure, who later recalled on the Guardian how much of Live Aid planning unfolded on instinct and goodwill rather than strategy or budget. So obviously they're not thinking of ideology. Obviously they're not thinking of what looks best for people 40 years later.
Yeah.
And the so they're looking at, and this thing unfolded on instinct and goodwill.
Yeah.
So they say, look, there's a brutal famine in Ethiopia. Can we do something about it? We'll use our power as popular musicians to bring attention to it and to help save it. Even by bringing attention to it, they did quite a good thing because let's face it, anything happens in Ethiopia over there is quite diminished. If you've got if you've got a flood in Texas, everybody feels it because it feels like it's close by. But when you have a flood in Pakistan, like some years ago when it killed 40,000 people,
Nobody
like
cares.
it's
Yeah.
forgotten,
Yeah.
oh, wow, there was a flood, oh, way over there, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody cares. It's a kind of very often when it's in a different continent. If it's not in Europe, if it's not in Americas, there's kind of a nobody really cares about it.
That's right. And they said that Geldof says they used in order to get past the political agenda and all that, they used the lingua franca of the planet, which is not
Music.
English, but rock and roll, he said.
Yeah.
We were
I love
able to address the international absurdity and moral repulsion of people dying of want in a world of surplus perfectly. Yeah. Now,
I
the
love that
complaints, of
quote.
course, were for Africa without Africans, as they've said before.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that quote from Geldof, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. What would Canadians do if war were declared? This is kind of one of these esoteric kind of questions that's revisited every once in a while. And the Angus Reid Institute poll found that 49% of Canadians would be willing to fight for their country in the event of an armed conflict today. Right?
Yes, it's kind of interesting. I They found that about half of Canadians would stand up and go to fight. Some would put parameters on it if they agreed with the war. If we went to war with the with Singapore for some damn reason because dumb reason, who's going to go fight that? But if we had to go fight against Russia or China, would we do it? It would, for a lot of Canadians, it would depend on the war.
But
I
again,
don't know.
if you wind the clock back over the last 7 or 8 years, agree versus disagree. Then the rankings of the rankings on this have gone down, right? In history, more people would have been willing to fight for their country than they are now, and there wouldn't
Well,
have
the
at
distinction.
times there wouldn't have been that question about if my country called on me, I would volunteer, or only if I agreed with the reasons for the fighting. There wouldn't be that.
Well, we got to remember that there's much more information out there now. The Germans may not have gone off on a huge. Uh, that may not have happened in Germany. The rise of Nazism and the aggression of Nazism may not have happened nowadays. Not possible because the amount of information that's out there, and if their leader said, "Okay, now it's time to attack Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, because we there's lots of Germans there, so we got to take them." Who is going to agree with that nowadays? They're going to, even if you had the kind of populism that Hitler had. So there are, of course, the people are going to look at what the war is. If it is to defend Canada. Now, we did go to war in Afghanistan when Article 5 of the NATO thing came up, but we did not go to Iraq. Why didn't we go to Iraq? Because there was no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. We thought we would do more harm than good. There was no particular proven reason why we should go there. However, if they did find nuclear bombs and massive amounts of chemical weapons and a delivery system that could come all the way to Canada, and Iraq had a huge beef with Canada, maybe we would have gone to war with them for that particular reason. But
Yeah.
just because they had a despot that was particularly cruel despot, but you would do much more damage going to war and kill a lot more people than just stay away from it. That was Canada's decision. But when it came to Afghanistan, we backed up our allies and went there because that was the source of the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah. It's
So,
interesting that a higher percentage of those that were 55 plus would be prepared to go to war. They would volunteer to go to war. Than
I'll
the
put that.
percentage of 18 to 34-year-olds.
Well, the 18 and 34-year-olds are very suspicious about wars, and we see what's happened in the U.S. and Iran and the history of the wars of the West, particularly the U.S. one, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and that kind of thing. So of
I was
course they're going to be very.
I was
They're
going
going
to
to be
say
really.
here, the irony, of course, is that those that were 55 plus may be interested in volunteering, but they'd probably all be rejected by whatever service they volunteered for. You know, your
Well,
eyesight,
they could.
your eyesight's
Yeah,
too
but
bad. You're too fat.
they could fly a drone. They could fly a drone from a computer.
Well, I suppose that's possible. Yes.
Now the real issue, I think, one of the things that they don't bring up in this article is a great deal of the younger people in Canada are uh, from other nations. Their their ethnicity is from offshore. They might be from India or
Well, they're
different
not
places in
talking
Africa,
any.
all different places in the world, right?
Yeah, they're not talking ethnicity of anybody at all here, right?
But I think they should, because I think that um, the powerful patriotism that takes a while. Right now, you think of yourself as an Italian Canadian or a Indian Canadian or a Pakistani Canadian or a Nigerian Canadian, and you kind of think of yourself you haven't really bonded with Canada enough to go march off the war for it. And we find this with new immigrants,
Yeah.
just like Don Cherry said, you don't find immigrant people wearing that poppy, do you? How many Indian people do you see wearing the poppy? How many African? You don't, because
You
they
don't
don't
see me.
understand it.
You don't see me wearing the poppy either.
Well, you have an ideological
Yeah.
difference, but almost everybody wears the poppy, including me, of my who are born in Canada, uh, but you or Britain, and
Yeah. I know.
so there is an homage to those young people that went over there and either died or got injured or whatever reason. Uh, but you don't find the new Canadians wearing them at all. For one thing, I don't think they understand the purpose of it, and can they identify it because their relatives weren't the ones that marched off the war.
That's
Although you
true.
can make the argument for India because India did send a lot of troops to fight against the Japanese.
Well,
So
India had troops basically both on the European front and against the Japanese. Yeah.
yeah, so they did a lot of fighting in that. But to relate what India did back then to what Canada did now, so you don't find that connection. Oh yeah, well, why should I wear a red poppy for Canadians that died when all my relatives were somewhere else doing their thing? I don't think they get it. I
Yeah.
think probably in time they might, but I think that's probably part of the issue. New Canadians, why would they want to go? I don't
Well,
think they've
and yeah,
bonding.
and
They
probably a
have that
larger
powerful spiritual attachment to the country they moved to.
Yeah, and you're right. That's probably one of the reasons why the numbers who would volunteer that were in that young bracket So being 50% in that young bracket versus the 70% of the older bracket would volunteer.
Yes, because we have a strong attachment to our country. This is our mother country. When somebody comes from India, India was their mother country. Somebody comes from China, China was their mother country. It takes a generation or two to develop that strong bond. If I had moved to if I moved to India, would I be really if my family had moved to India, let's say, I wouldn't be too happy about putting on the army fatigues and then going to fight Pakistan. You know what I mean? Even though it's a big issue for Indians, it's important to Indians, but it wouldn't be important to me, and I think you can relate to that.
Yeah, and yeah. Okay, so um, be careful, Dave. Talking about those people.
Yeah,
Don
well,
Cherry
yeah,
got fired for that. Remember?
yeah, exactly. It's hard to get to talk about a whole lot of different ethnic people by other than saying those people who are new Canadians or something like that. Yeah, I see the problem, but I don't think Cherry should have been fired anyway. That was his opinion, but that was the excuse that CBC needed, so they dumped
Yeah,
him.
I think it was one of those. I don't. I think it was one of those dumb things. I don't. I think they'd been looking out for a way to get rid of him anyway.
They tried about 3 or 4 times before that and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But in any
I
case,
don't, I
that
don't
would
know
be
too
part
much of
of
the.
a.
Yeah, I don't know too much of the context of it anyway. Realistically, because I wasn't following it at the time. It
Yes.
just seemed a
So
bit dumb.
so I don't I think a lot of new Canadians just don't have that bond, and I would make that same analogy if if I moved to India because it was a good job opportunity there, and I moved to India and my kids were born there. I sure wouldn't want to suit them up to go to war with Pakistan. That would be the last thing. I wouldn't be supportive of that at all.
No,
And
I
I think
wouldn't.
probably
Yeah.
a lot of new Canadians say, why would we want to go to fight against Russia? They haven't done anything against me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In any case, with the Canadian government investing a whole lot, that's one of the things we can,
Well, these
oddly enough, the one thing we can appreciate Trump for is getting us off the couch and investing in our own military, and
and this
that
is
is probably a good thing.
and this is largely a theoretical discussion because it's not as if war is on the horizon anywhere.
Except maybe with the orangutan down south
Yeah,
trying to
but
make us.
that's more a theoretical war than anything else, right? Okay,
Yes,
and that's
but
and
the
you know,
thing, but the point here, one of the points made in the article was of this massive amounts of investment that Canada is making in
in
its
the in
military,
yeah in the military, yeah,
and
yeah.
yes, and we find it very difficult to recruit people into the military,
But
and
again,
that's going to be a problem going forward.
yeah, but again, moving on, moving in that regard as well, we're more into a trade war than we are into a physical war with the United States. Um, Industry uh, Minister Mélanie Joly, God, I can't put that together. Says that these are not normal times where and economic diplomacy is more important than ever before, and that the threat of the US is becoming weaker while Canada sets up new trade deals with other partners like the European Union. So she's putting all that into perspective.
Yeah, she's saying that this is different times,
Yeah,
different times, and that's another favor Trump has done for us. he has made it very, very clear to us how vulnerable our economy was for a very long time. And
Yeah.
that was the argument of the original, those people who were against the original NAFTA deal. They pointed out that sooner or later, we would be, the United States could change and victimize us through a NAFTA agreement because there's nothing we can do. If they say red is blue, we're going to have to say that. If they say that we're taking advantage of them, they can come up with any reason, and there's nothing much we can do about it because they hold most of the cards. That seems to have happened now, and we are scrambling around trying to find different trade partners and everything. But Trump has showed us something that is very important, that we are extremely vulnerable with our amount of dependency on the United States. The rest of the world is going through that right now too, realizing that they are overly dependent on the United States. So Joly is saying these are different times and we have to expand our trade to different partners. And of course, we found that our interprovincial trade was nearly barbaric. We had
Yeah.
trade 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 impediments between provinces more so than we had with the country just south of us.
Yeah, and the irony there was, of course, that you could probably import something from Saskatchewan, out of not through Saskatchewan, but actually from Michigan easier than you could from Saskatchewan itself.
It was killer when some years ago when you could buy BC plywood in Niagara Falls, New York, for much less than you could buy it here.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
gives you an idea.
oh yeah,
So it went across international border, got transported all the way to Western New York and New York State, and we could go over there and buy it for considerably less than we could buy it here in Canada. That gives you an idea.
yeah, yeah. That's kind of how stupid things were, but. Why did we have those interprovincial trades? And in fact, probably that wood had moved through Ontario to get to New York anyway.
No, I think it was directly like it the easiest transportation network would have gone south into the United States and then across the prairies and into probably
Well,
distribution
or
here and there.
or maybe it was shipped around through the Panama Canal.
I doubt it, but maybe it could be
Well,
because it was.
it's large volume. You're talking about stuff that often would be shipped in large volumes, right?
Yeah, it's usually on trains.
Mm,
Lumber is usually done on trains.
yeah,
I think. I mean, I couldn't positively tell you that, but I think most of the market in the United States that we have would be serviced by train because train is after ships. Train is the best way to ship bulk, a lot of bulk. And I remember when one of the contractors I used to work for had a big job up north in northern Ontario, and they had to ship a lot of equipment, a lot of very large pieces of prefab stuff and everything. They thought right off the bat the easiest way to do it would be just by ship, but it turned out not to be the case. It was
mm,
rail.
yeah,
Rail was the one that did it, and when they had unusual sized pieces and everything, the railway companies like worked very well with them to devise strategies and ways in which to transport it on rail. It was cheaper, it was more efficient, and so there you go.
yeah,
Rail is vitally important
yeah.
for trade. So
Okay.
probably that. Yeah.
So, a New York think tank, Manhattan Institute, is saying that they found that 99% of powdered form of or pills in of fentanyl during the last decade have come from Mexico and not Canada.
Yes, the very idea, like Trump has has reissued. Well, of course, he's threatened us with
It's the
35%
it's the
tariff.
you thing, right?
Yes, and one of the reasons why he cites is that fentanyl is just pouring over the Canadian border, which is untrue. I
Yeah, it's
think
never
what
been. Yeah,
point what they estimate the U.S. officials, law enforcement, estimate that 0.1% of the fentanyl used in the United States comes from Canada. Uh, Oddly enough, a lot of the ingredients for fentanyl, like of course the ingredients go to Mexico, and ingredients come to Canada, and the ingredients also come to the United States. A lot of the ingredients that come to the United States are then shipped to Mexico, and the fentanyl is then made and shipped back. And I think it happens here too. The fentanyl ingredients for fentanyl probably make their way
but they
into Canada from the United States and then back again. Uh,
but again, many of those ingredients are not purely for fentanyl.
that's a big issue. That's a very, very big issue. Is a lot of the ingredients for fentanyl are used in many other pharmaceuticals.
Yeah,
So yes, and China has refused to cooperate in this a lot. Some people even speculate that China is allowing this to happen because it is trying to get its revenge for the opium wars of over 100 years ago.
I,
I
I think that's bunk. I really do. I think that's nonsense.
I think so too. I think the biggest problem is the appetite for drugs in the Western world. Like in China, and that they can come down on it pretty quick. If you've got your neighbor who you suspect takes fentanyl, and you tell the cops, they'll just overcome his
Yeah,
own rights. He doesn't have any rights, so they can just walk in your house and find it and then throw you in jail. But here we have rights. The biggest problem is the appetite we have for those drugs. The next problem is one of the things that the United States allowed was anything under $800 got into the country duty free for a long time. Do you remember that? They just stopped that. So anything of worth of under $800 was quickly passed through U.S. Customs. There was a rule like there was a lower tariff or no tariff on things $800 or less to stimulate the economy. That was the source of a lot of fentanyl ingredients because these packages were not looked at overly closely. So it takes a very little amount of ingredients to make a dangerous amount of fentanyl.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Now, Trump is lying, of course. He's saying they're pouring over the border. We know that drugs, cocaine, heroin, and even fentanyl come from the United States into Canada.
More
We know
often than the
that
other way around. Yeah, way
we're getting
way
a lot
more
of
often. Yeah,
we're getting a lot of illegal guns from the United States into Canada. But you can't mention that because if you do, Trump will have a tantrum. You know, he has a narrative. Drugs are pouring over the border. And you say, well, show me. And he freaks out. And then he ups the tariff again because you don't want to believe his narrative. Is this the art of the deal? I don't know.
or
It's
or is it or is it the art of dementia?
I think he's just uh, what I think he's doing with this is when he keeps delaying the possibility of making a deal and throwing out more threats of tariffs. I think what he's doing is he's delaying the effects of tariffs until after the midterms next year. It'll take a while before the price of tariffs show up
Yeah,
on whatever the American public buys. If they show up too early, it might affect the midterm. So what I think he's doing is just delaying the effects of these tariffs as long as he can, so that when they kick in, it won't be until after the midterms.
Yeah.
at least in a big way.
Yeah.
That was part of the reason why he phoned China. When he said China's got to phone me, well, they didn't. So when these big companies saying, you know what, there aren't going to be any toys on the market and everything's going to go up. You're not going to have a Christmas. And at first he thought, well, so a kid doesn't get $100, she gets three. That was his attitude then, but he had to quickly turn that because his advisors are saying if we have a very expensive Christmas coming up, that remember the midterms are right after that, so you got to be careful. So I think what he's doing is just kicking down the road the effects of tariffs. Now he's saying things like we're going to charge them a 35% tariff. What does that tell you? Right? Oh, well, we're going to charge the EU a 35% tariff. Well, no, the charge comes in the United States.
Yeah.
So goods come from EU. The EU doesn't pay them, but he keeps the terminology as if the foreign country is going to pay.
Yeah.
And he says, we're going to tax them. We're going to tax them. No, you're not going to tax the other country. You just aren't. You're not going to say, okay, China, you have to pay this tax.
Yeah, because China doesn't pay the tax, the US consumer pays the tax. France doesn't pay the tax, the US consumer pays the tax. Canada doesn't pay the tax, the US consumer pays the tax.
Exactly. And well, this is one of the most. The only thing I can see. So the tariffs are designed for two reasons. One, to bring back more manufacturing into the United States, particularly of those manufacturing that they thought was critical to American defense and security
Well,
and so on. That's part of it.
the other,
The
the
other
other
part of
thing,
it, wait till I finish the other. The
yeah,
other part is to make up money that they're giving away on tax breaks.
yeah,
So the money that from the big beautiful bill has to be balanced with money coming from somewhere, and it will come as a tax on goods coming into the country.
yeah. The other thing is that Carney is delaying plans to slap retaliatory taxes on these things, in part because there's a cabinet meeting about this on the 21st, and I believe there's a what do you call a premier's meeting on the 22nd of July. So they're looking at discussing these in both those settings before making any response to the US.
I would think it would be less about trade policies as they've got a bunch of psychiatrists in the room and ask them what the hell's going on with this guy. How do we deal with a nut bar like this? Now, isn't entirely a nut bar. He's upsetting everything that he possibly can, just like a just like any kind of like a terrorist. A terrorist, what they do is they upset the functioning of government, hoping for weaknesses which they can exploit.
Yeah,
I think that's what Trump's doing in a way. He's upsetting the world market and looking for weaknesses that he can exploit.
yeah.
Um,
That's
and
one way of looking at it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a part of his strategy is just to be bizarre and just keep upsetting the apple cart. But we see, uh, but right now he's been able to get away with it very well because the U.S. economy is in very good shape. Nothing bad has happened to the U.S. economy right now. Some people say because most of the investors uh, don't really pay much attention to him anymore because he's on and off and on and off and on and off. And until he settles down to give something definitive, then they'll decide whether it's good or bad. But until that happens, it's just oh, here he goes again. Uh, that is part of it, and but the other part is that the American economy is still just very strong. They've front loaded a lot of stuff. The companies for now are taking the hits from a lot of the tariffs. Right now, let's say like a Walmart or other company like that are absorbing the hits of the tariffs for the meantime because they don't want to raise them and then lower them and then raise them and lower them
Yeah.
uh, because they don't want to alienate their consumer base.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes in and pays $145 for a Chinese uh, item, $45 was tariffs. But tomorrow, the next shipment of this item comes in and it's $110. You see, they can't go up and down like that. That will upset their consumer base.
And
So most
what
of them
you
are absorbing a lot of the tariffs right now as uh, as a means by which just to wait it out to see what's happening.
And of course, what you alluded to there is the Dow Jones. Just to compare the one of them, Dow Jones Industrial Index now is at 44,371, back to where it was in December, to where it was in early February, before this whole tariff thing caused the stock market to crash.
Yes. So the first attempt at big tariffs was a failure, and the Liberation Day. So they had to back off really quick. He had to back off
Yeah,
on the tariffs on China. He had
and
to back off on some other stuff. So
and the
what you see
irony
is this pinballing up and down and up and down, just completely upsetting the apple cart, hoping to exploit weaknesses that will have right now. It seems that that the market is not paying attention to it right now.
Yeah, and exactly. So the market in July a year ago was at 41,000 on the Dow Jones. Now it's at 44,000. The low that happened in terms of the lowest of the low was at 37,000 on April the 8th. Um,
Right after Liberation Day.
well, no, right after these tariffs were put into place, right? That was where it reached the lowest of the low at 37,000 on April 8th. But we've recovered more, where we are. We've recovered back to where we were at the beginning of, in December of last year.
Yes, and the United States has created a lot more
Yeah.
jobs
Yeah.
too, which was nearly unexpected. So they do have a point when they say you predicted doom and gloom, and it didn't happen. However, guys like Powell, who is the chair of the Fed, is not reducing interest rates because he does not know yet, nor does the rest of the Fed, the other 6 or 7 members on the Fed. They do not know yet what the ultimate tariffs are going to be and how that will affect the economy.
Yeah.
When the tariffs are implemented, for sure, then they will have a noticeable effect on the economy. Right now, with the tariffs, the baseline tariffs at around 10%, it seems to be tolerable to the market. It's raising prices for the average American, but not that much. And Mike says, so why are we so worried about Trump saying he is adding a tariff? The USA uh, live beyond
Live
it
beyond its means.
lives beyond its means, therefore needs what we offer. Yeah, that's very true. Where are they going to get nickel? If they get half their nickel from Ontario and then put a 50% tariff on nickel, but you've noticed that the energy exports, electrical, oil, those are only 10%. And I don't see them ever going up farther than that because the United States needs those.
Yeah.
Um, and the potash, the American farmers need Saskatchewan potash in a big way. About what 70-80% of the potash comes from Saskatchewan. So what they're doing is they're charging the farmers 10% more than they used to pay, and that 10% goes into the government coffers. So they've harmed the farmers or made the farmers pay more, but not that much more. So this 10% across the board tariff, which is 4 times as much as historical tariffs that the U.S. has charged. They typically charge 2.5% prior to this. So the tariff charge of 10% is 4 times what they got before, and it seems to be sustainable, but and not affect the world economy that much. But the if the really big ones come in, that's going to be a real problem. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Is this the art of the deal?
Yeah, and part of this is White House has said they granted not anonymity to discuss negotiations with the administration plans to impose tariffs only on goods that don't comply with the 2020 USMCA. That's what their current position is, but of course, any moment Donald Trump could change that.
Well, they're assuming that they haven't said it. They haven't set it in stone, and sure, and Trump is not going to do that. What Trump is not is a man of character. He's not a he's not an honorable man, and we have to put that out there. An honorable man would then set up and say, "I have to do something more for my country to make it better," and there are trade imbalances that we can fix and trade impediments that we don't like, and then come to Canada and deal with Canada. What's fair for you? What's fair for me? These are our issues. We want them fixed up, and that. But he's not an honorable man. He's he lies. He changes his mind. When Japan thought they had a deal, look, Vietnam thought they had a deal with them. The Trump administration said, "Oh yeah, we got to deal with the EU and we got to deal with Vietnam," and then they turn around and dump another tariff on Vietnam after they were supposedly had a deal with Vietnam.
And
So
there's
the
Angela, and
guy has no honor, and
yeah,
he has no honor or distinction of
yeah.
an honorable man.
Yeah, and Angela's basically saying as soon as he'll change his mind right after the ink dries and a new deal anyway.
That's the problem. That's why these deals have to go over to Congress. Congress is the one that's supposed to be making trade deals,
Yeah,
and they're allowing Trump to do this with his executive authority, citing national security issues. And as long as he says fentanyl is pouring over the border from Canada, he can do what he wants. And nobody in Congress has got the backbone to say, "Hey, wait a minute, that is extreme overreach. You're doing, you're, you're, you're lying about that or exaggerating that so that you can be the one that makes these trade deals. We are the one that should be doing these trade deals." But every Republican is terrified of him. They bow to him every day he walks by. So there's nothing going to be done there. They're not going to assert their authority, sadly.
yeah. Okay. All right. Police face questions in Quadville after an attack on an Ontario child.
Yes, this is
I've never heard of this village before. Quadville, actually. Just realised I'm mispronouncing it. Quadville. Yeah.
yeah, it's a northern community, and something horrific has happened there. A child was found with life-threatening injuries. An 8-year-old girl. She was mauled pretty bad, and it was uh, it was a miracle that she was alive in the first place, and a miracle that she's still alive, judging by their injuries. At first, they thought that it might have been because of the severity of the injuries. They thought it might have been an animal attack, a bear or a wolf or something of that kind. Uh, so that's the first avenue they did. They did not. Uh, they were duty bound to tell everybody, watch out for animal attacks because we found this little girl, and it appears that she's had being attacked by an
Yeah.
animal. So be very careful, family, your children and stuff up there. Be very careful. There might be an animal out there.
But eventually, a couple of weeks afterwards, a 17-year-old boy was charged with sexual assault and attempted murder.
Yeah, so this is kind of outraged the people of the area, saying, "Why didn't you tell us before?" This is 2 weeks later. The police have defended themselves, saying, we had to warn you about an animal attack just in case it was one, but we did not rule out all other possibilities." But it took them a while to get to the idea that there was, or put out there, that this child was uh, sexually abused and mauled by her abuser, a 17-year-old boy who remains unnamed because of the Youth Protection Act.
Yeah.
So a 17-year-old, nearly a man, basically tears apart this poor little girl and sexually assaults her. I think the very first thing they should have done was a swab, and they did find evidence of uh, sexual assault. I think they probably found it right away, but for some reason did not issue that. Now, that would have been also a warning they should have done, because, yeah, it could have been an animal, but as soon as they found out, and they would have found out in short order, that the child was abused, um, they should have put out that order too. There is someone among you who is attacking children.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, everybody's trying to protect their children from an animal attack, but they don't find out 2 weeks later that they should be watching who is around their property. Is it this abuser or this attacker?
Yeah. They don't say, of course, the age of this girl either.
8 years old.
Oh, 8 years old. Okay. Okay. I missed that one somehow. All right. Okay. Fair. And then the 17-year-old has been charged with sexual assault and attempted murder now.
Yeah, and of course
And of
his
course, no
identity.
names have been given, of course, because of the rules.
Yeah, Youth Protection Act.
Yeah.
However, I wonder if this is going to be moved up to adult court, because he's 17. He's almost 18 years old, which would make him an
Well,
adult.
it,
And the horrific crime that he has.
likelihood is that he won't be tried until he is an adult anyway.
Possibly, but if they had to do it now, I think the court would probably move it up into adult court, because
Yeah.
it's an adult crime.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing about it would be that if he's into the adult court, it would, of course, his name would be known.
Yeah, so there's a predator, a 17-year-old predator, which they.
Yeah, that's disgusting in its own right. A 17-year-old predator who's viciously attacked somebody.
Yes. So I hope he doesn't get a whole lot of protection from that. Well, obviously, anybody that's willing to kill an 8-year-old child, the society has to be protected from. Something is definitely wrong there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that person is a criminal, whether he's 17 years old or not. He's a criminal doing adult crime.
Yeah.
If they give him a reduced sentence just because he's a child in the eyes of the law,
Well, you see, the worst about that kind of crime is that that's the type of offender that could so easily develop into some form of serial killer type person.
well, yeah, or even just abuse women from time to time. I watched a video the other day about a guy that was arrested when he was like in his 70s or something.
Yeah.
He had done from the time he was about 18 years old on. He'd done 3 murders of women and a couple of assaults, but it's spaced out over a long lifetime.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a whole lot that he did, but still there was this urge in him that sometimes he couldn't resist. He had a wife and family and kids and all that, and they say that Bundy, the when he was around, he was a very charming man, and nobody
Yeah.
would have ever suspected.
Well, and it's the same with, you know, it's in fact the same with many of these killers. The neighbours of the Yorkshire Ripper basically said he's the most mild mannered person there is.
Except one of his neighbors that kept trying to tell the cops it was him, and the
Yeah.
cops didn't pay attention to him. I guess he came into the police station every once in a while and said, "That's the guy. He's the guy." They just kind of ignored him, thinking he was just a nosy neighbor. But he was right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the way these sort of things go occasionally, isn't it? You know, but again, one has to, when you get a kind of disturbed 17-year-old, you've really got to wonder about uh, the future of that person.
That person has to be watched for the rest of their life.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
and we don't know the reasons. This could be a person who has a very low IQ. It could be a person that has a very high IQ. It could be a person. Obviously, the person has no innate humanity because who would, even at 17 years old, to victimize an 8-year-old child? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, who would do that? Like, I mean, it's almost, if you try to put your head into his head, you just get revulsion come back at you. It's hard. It would be impossible to do that for a normal person, to try to put the head of a person that abused an 8-year-old child and try to think that way. All you get is vomit coming back out, like revulsion. So I don't know. It would take a real psychiatrist to kind of sort this guy out. But I
Mm.
certainly don't hope that because of his youth status, that he gets a reduced sentence.
No, because in fact, the worst of this is that if he's out in 5 years' time or less, you know, he's just going to do that again, disappear off the face of the planet and do it again.
Yeah, we remember that back after the Constitution was signed and youth were protected in law, that the triads were using 16-year-old hitmen to kill people. The triad crime group, usually Vietnamese kids, were used as hitmen, and they would get 3-year sentences for
Yeah,
murdering someone,
yeah,
cold-blooded murder. And that was a loophole that they had to try to fix. Eventually, they started trying them in adult court for severe crimes. For a while, they couldn't do anything. You got 3 years and you're out.
yeah. All right. Yeah. Anything else to say on that one? I don't know if anybody's written anything on that one. What did they? What did they? They said they did not want to cause public panic.
Well, yeah, but if you're in a place where you know you're safe from animals, your child is not safe from a predator.
Yeah.
So they should have come up and said, look, now part of it could be they didn't want the guy to know that they were looking for him, and so that he wasn't wise to that. But the fact of the matter is they warned you about the animals so to protect your family. But definitely they should have warned you about a person like that.
Yeah.
That is a much more of a threat than a wild animal. So what do? You just keep an eye on your kids for the wild animal. You can keep them send them to school and all those other things where wild animals are not going to be, but the damn predator could be there.
Yeah.
That was unwise by the police.
Yeah.
I would feel betrayed by the
Yeah.
police if I lived around there and I had children. I would say we can't trust the police to see our to make a place safe for us if they won't even tell us what dangers lurk out there.
All right. And I think we've kind of come to the end of that one. And we'll come back tomorrow. We've got a couple of stories hanging over till tomorrow. as we always do.
Yes. Anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu. And as always, I will ask you not to forget Gaza. It's getting more and more horrible. The idea of expelling all those people, Palestinian people, from Gaza is is imminent. It's an absolutely terrible thing. It's a bizarro world when a war criminal and vicious man like Netanyahu can nominate uh, a person that is supplying him with the weapons to do the genocide that he's doing for no Nobel Peace Prize. It's just a bizarre world. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. All
Remember
right.
Gaza, pray for them, pray for the people of Ukraine as well. That doesn't seem to be able to stop anytime soon.
All right.
The great peacemaker cannot make peace.